Today on episode 32 of the Play Guitar Podcast, I'm talking microphones for your guitar. With a little bit of knowledge, your rig can sound fabulous with just the right mic. Also, I've got some listener feedback, so stay tuned. Welcome to episode 32 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that'll help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today. Today's a very, very cool day for me. It's a gear episode day, my kind of fun. Lately, we've been dealing with mindset. We've been dealing with, foundational things. But, before I get back into the other stuff, the chords and the scales and rhythms and all those kind of things, I like to break it up a little bit. So this is going to be a gear episode, but it's not your usual gear episode. It's about something that all performing guitar players have to deal with. And this usually happens for intermediate players, but beginner players, listen up. You're heading in this direction. It's all about microphones, getting your sound out of your electric guitar or your acoustic guitar, or even vocals if you're singing, into a live mixer or into a recording device of some sort. It's not as easy as it seems. So the reason I have microphones on the brain lately is because, I was going to do a test between this new mic that I just got from Shure Incorporated. I won it and got it in the mail and opened it up, and I was going to do a test back and forth between my ATR 2100 that I've been using and the SM7B. Well, I hooked it up. I talked into it for a little bit. I said, hey, that sounds pretty good. I'm just going to use it. So I'm just going with it. I'm not going to do the test. It sounds pretty nice. So I want to thank everyone at Shure, especially Michael, who I got to meet at the podcast movement. Thank you so much. I'm putting it to good use right here on the show today. This is the black broadcasting mic. You see it in a lot of the radio studios. It's famous for being used on Michael Jackson's Thriller as the main vocal mic and lots of his other hits too by Bruce Swiden. To me, though, it was that mic that James Hetfield just walked around with screaming into while they were recording that. You remember that Some Kind of Monster documentary. I love that. So it's a great mic, and it's also used for a lot of other things too. It sounds great on guitar cabinets, among other things, which we will probably be hearing later on in the show. So getting this mic in, it just got me thinking about microphones for guitars. And I thought back to what a struggle I had understanding microphones and what they do to your sound as I was learning more and more about guitar tone, and I was starting to play out and record. It was a struggle. It's not as easy as it seems. It's not just that easy to put a mic up and just press record. Although there is one mic that you could argue works this way. But a microphone can change the way your instrument or your voice sounds dramatically. And it's important to understand, even if you aren't going the traditional amp route, or if you just play acoustic guitar, having a basic understanding of microphones and the microphone technique, it's a serious step in understanding how your instrument sounds. We're not even going to get past that. We're not even going to get to preamps and all these other effects and all that's a whole other topic. But just microphone choice and microphone placement is really knowing a little bit is going to help move you forward. There are a few basic concepts that can really help you sound your best. And I'm going to bring them to you with some sound clips today to really help you understand how important microphones are to guitar players. So that's what we're going for today. So I want to thank you again for joining me, and hold on, we're right about to get into the main topic. How to choose the right mic for your guitar. Every guitar player's got to deal with microphones at some point, whether it's for recording or for playing live, or even in modelers or software amps that where you have control in the software of your virtual mic placement. Instead of turning up the treble on your amps or on an EQ, you can move the mic around to get different sounds. So understanding microphones, which microphones to use, what they sound like, and what you can do with them is very important for guitar players. The first use of microphones that most guitar players run into is in playing live on stage. Usually it's when you're in your first band and it's either the sound man or your friend or will run up and you're all set up, you're about ready to go, and they'll stick a mic in front of your amp and you're done. You can't really hear anyway because you're on stage behind the speakers. All you can do is hope for the best, hope that mic sounds good. So you try to make it sound as good on stage as you can, and you pray that it sounds the way you hear it to the audience. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to hear a recording of your show, and usually that recording is an eye-opener. You might say something like, that doesn't sound the way I remember it. So that's the first thing you would run into on stage, but also when you get into recording your guitar, that's when things tend to go south a little bit. You put up a microphone, record a little bit, listen back, and then you get this sinking feeling in your stomach. Your amp or your acoustic guitar that you've mic'd doesn't sound the same as you're used to hearing it sound. So the first idea that most people have is we need to fix that, and they reach for the EQ. Let's turn up some treble, turn up the bass, and usually that doesn't work. Adding bass or treble, it just changes the frequencies. It doesn't really help change the basic tone of your guitar. So where most people go after that, they start to research, why doesn't my guitar sound like my favorite recordings? And you start to figure out what other guitar players use. Oh, they use this microphone with this preamp, and it takes you down a whole new gear rabbit hole. It's not enough that you're already stuck in the guitar gear rabbit hole. Now you're spending more money on preamps and microphones and everything. But if you just know a little bit about microphones and how they work, you can get great results without spending tons and tons of money. So today, I want to give you an overview of microphones for guitars, whether they're for miking your amplifier or for miking your acoustic guitars. Now, this isn't an exhaustive study. This is just a primer. It's an overview for those of you who haven't dealt with microphones a whole lot before. And even if you have, we'll get into some things that you need to know before you make decisions on a purchase, maybe. So, did you ever mic your amp and listen back and it sounded nothing like you're used to? I told this story before in another show, where I was in the studio and everything went wrong. And I told about how I went home and I found an old pedal. It was a Boss DS1. And I wasn't using it, but I just tried it out because everything else I tried wasn't working. And it worked. It sounded great. Well, on that, one of the other things that we changed on that session was we changed the microphone. When I went into the studio and they told me where to set my amp up, there was a condenser microphone. And we'll talk about what condenser microphones are a little bit later. And that's what they were wanting to use for my amp. Well, there was so much wrong with how I sounded that I went home that day and I focused on what I could do something about. I focused on my gear. I tried different effects to, everything I had. I just went through everything and I found something that I think works. I tried the stomp boxes. I had my DS1, plugged that into my Fender amp. Things started to sound a little more Marshall-y, and it worked for that slide that I was doing. But another change I asked for when I went back the next day was a mic change. I changed to something I was familiar with, and that was a Shure SM57. And then things started to sound right. So there are so many variables to guitar tone. You've got your amps, your guitar, different pickups, different pedals, your speakers, speaker cabinets sound different. Your cables can make a difference. Your guitar picks can make a difference. Your strings can make a difference. And once you finally find your way through all of that and you sound just the way that you want to, you get it perfect, you want to share that sound with the world. And that's where microphones come in. Whether it's for a gig or for a recording, you've now taken your next step into the next level of gear problems. Okay. So we're going to talk about microphones today. I'm going to introduce a little bit about microphones. So what's the definition of a microphone? We all think we know what a microphone is. Here's from dictionary.com. It's an instrument capable of transforming sound waves into changes in electric currents or voltage that's used in recording or transmitting sound. So in essence, we're taking something very big, some big, loud sound waves, and we're transforming them into something very little. Electric currents and voltage. And that's the first thing that most guitar players notice when they hear their amps or their acoustic guitars recorded for the first time. How small it sounds. That recorded sound, it has a loss of the weight of the sound. So that's where we get into microphone technique and mixing, and those things come in to give back that big sound to your recording. But with some knowledge, you'll be able to make the right mic choices for your live rig, even for your modeler software and impulse responses. This works for that too. You need to know a little bit about this kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and start talking about types of microphones. Not the brands, not the models, types. We're going to talk about three different things: dynamic mics, condenser mics, and ribbon mics. We need to know the difference between these three types of microphones. So here's a definition of a dynamic mic. And this is from Merriam-Webster. It's a microphone in which the sound waves cause a movable wire or coil to vibrate. Why do I even do? Vibrate in a magnetic field and thus induce a current. Okay, I'm lost after that. But I know what a dynamic mic sounds like. It's warm and it's punchy. Dynamic mics miss the high-end detail of a condenser mic. A condenser mic sounds crystal clear. Dynamic mics aren't crystal clear. They're warm. They sound great for electric guitar. And not having that really highest highs and lowest lows, that's not that big deal for an electric guitar, because the speakers from a guitar amp, they rarely produce those very high frequencies anyway. So you're not needing them. But another thing that is, you wouldn't think is a good thing, but it's a very good thing about dynamic mics, is they are less sensitive and they reject a lot of unwanted sound. So I'm using a dynamic mic now, and I'm right in front of the mic, the SM7B. If I was to keep talking and move over here to the left a little bit, and I was only about 3 or 4 inches off to the left of the mic, my voice went away. Okay? And if I back up a little bit, I'm back about a foot right now. My voice went away again. They do not, you have to be right on the mic for it to pick it up. It will reject a lot of bad things that you don't want. Like, for podcasts, lawnmowers. That's one of my, I podcast on Tuesdays, and it happens to be lawnmower day around my neighborhood here. So that you won't hear those lawnmowers in the show. Or computer fans, I record with a computer. Those fan noise doesn't get into the microphone. But for guitar, what's great about it is it doesn't pick up other instruments on stage. It just basically picks up your amp, and you might have drums and bass and other guitars. It's really just going to reject all of that and pick up what's right in front of it. So let's talk about some mic choices. What are some dynamic mics that I could use that would sound good on my guitar? Well, we've already talked about the Shure SM57. That's kind of the granddaddy of all of the guitar mics. This is the one for as long as I can remember. You see it all the time. If you ever see the president on TV, he's always talking into an SM57. They're built like a tank. I've seen videos of people driving nails with them. I still have all of mine, and they just keep working. I kind of collect them at this point. I don't even know how many I have. They're just SM57s in different gig bags I have all over the place. But what's cool about them is there's a little boost in the mids, and upper mids, I think, that is so awesome for electric guitar. And the reason why, it helps it cut through the mix. And I've heard the clips. I did some clips earlier, and you'll hear that right away. They're also a great stage and recording vocal mic as well. Tom Petty used an SM57 all the time. Okay, so let's talk about the next one. The next one that you'll hear some people use is the brother to the 57. It's called the Shure SM58. And this is more of a vocal mic, handheld vocal mic with that traditional ball top on it. It's got a bit more bass to the mic. That's flattering for vocals. But a lot of guitar players use those instead of the 57. They will. Robin Trower uses a 58 on his cabinets. I read, and some people even will take that ball top off of the 58, and I think that gives it a little more high end. I'm not sure. I have never done that myself. But there's some other mics too. There's the Sennheiser E609. That's one of those kind of flat mics that kind of hangs down from the top of the amp, and it's flat against the grill cloth. There's also the Sennheiser MD421, which is a classic guitar microphone. And there's the one I'm talking about right today, the SM7B. It sounds great on guitar amps too. So those are our dynamic mics. A little bit about what they are, and those are mic choices. Let's move to the next group, the condenser mic. So here's the definition. A condenser mic is a microphone in which the sound waves cause a variation in capacitance, the vibrating diaphragm acting as one plate of a condenser. Well, to me, a condenser is a bright microphone. It's hi-fi. It's got a clinical sound. It's very sensitive, and it picks up everything. They're great for vocals because you'll hear all of the frequencies. One thing, whenever I think of a condenser microphone, I think of bluegrass bands. The way they will have one microphone on the stand, and it picks up the whole band on stage. And whenever someone is being featured, maybe, it's like the guitar player's being featured, or the violin player's being, or banjo, I don't know, is being featured, they will walk a little closer to that microphone. And it kind of gives them a boost. They're kind of self-mixing by using one condenser microphone. Condensers are great for acoustic guitar because you get a lot of sparkle and a lot of low end. They're also great for room sounds if you want to pick up the sound of a room. So how about some types of condenser mics that are used on guitar? There's the AKG C414. There's the Neumann U87, which is a classic mic. But how about some more? Those are very expensive. How about some more affordable? There's the Audio-Technica AT2020, which is really affordable. The MXL V67G, I happen to have that one there. It's a really nice little Chinese cheap mic, but it does the job. Okay, so that's condenser microphones. They're bright, sensitive, and they pick up everything. The last one we're going to talk about is ribbon microphones. That's the third type. And the ribbon mic it's a type of it's like a dynamic microphone, but what it uses is a thin metallic ribbon in there. They're very warm and realistic sounding. Frank Sinatra, when he would sing, he would use a ribbon microphone. It's that sound. It's a very warm sound, and they're fragile. They usually don't handle a lot of sound pressure. You don't see a lot of ribbon microphones being used on guitar cabinets. It might break that thin metallic ribbon that they use. But there are certain ribbon mics that are used and sound great on guitar cabs. The Royer 121 and the Beyerdynamic M160 come to mind. So those are the three types of microphones that we'll use for guitar: dynamic, condenser, and ribbon mics. Now, there's something we need to know about those. That's something called the polar pattern. And all that is what direction the mic picks up sound. There's the first one that's the most common, and it's pretty much in almost all these microphones I've talked about. It's called cardioid. And what that means is it just picks up sound from the front of the microphone and it rejects everything else. Kind of like this mic right here. Okay. And this is, like I said, this is the pattern that most of the mics I'm talking about today use. And it's very common. There's some other ones too. There's Omni, and that is a microphone that picks up in all directions. And then there's Figure 8, which picks up sound from the front of the mic, sound from the back of the mic, but not from the sides. If you were ever wanting to not hear some things on the sides and certain other things. And there's a lot of others too, but for basic guitar recording, we're just going to focus on cardioid. That's the most common, and it makes the most sense because we want to keep everything else out and just the guitar in. So let's talk about some best practices when miking different guitar and different applications. So for the electric guitar, where you place the microphone on the speaker determines the tone that you get. So if you were to put the microphone far to the edge of the speaker, you get a certain sound, which we'll hear in a little bit. Or the closer you get to the center, you get a different sound. So where you put that microphone, it's a big deal. Also, distance from the speaker. So say if your microphone is right up on the speaker, you'll get one sound. And if it's maybe a foot away, you're going to get a whole different sound. You get more of the room in that sound. The closer you are to the speaker, the more you'll just get that speaker sound. And another thing that we would deal with is called axis. And that's what angle the microphone is at. You might have it right up on the speaker, but you might have it angled to the side, and that's going to give you another type of sound too. One of the bad things about that, you'll see a lot of people when they don't have a microphone stand is they hang one of these SM57s over the cabinet right in front of the speaker. So the microphone is actually pointing straight down at the ground, and the sound's going across it. So you don't have to trip on a mic stand, but that sound never really sounded that great to me when I've heard people mic that way. For acoustic guitar, we're going to focus mostly on condenser mics. We want all that high-end detail. We want it to sound very realistic. Dynamic mics work for acoustic guitar too, and some like that. But to me, it misses the detail. But the biggest deal with miking an acoustic guitar is actually where you point the mic in relation to the sound hole of the guitar. The closer you are to that sound hole with the microphone, the more boomy it gets. It gets very bassy and boomy and almost unusable. And the farther you get away from it, the farther you move that microphone towards the neck, the more treble you get, the more high end. I rarely ever point a microphone directly in to the sound hole. Usually I'll either angle it more towards the neck or I'll move it actually away from the sound hole towards the middle of the neck. And the last thing that we can use, either one, a condenser or a dynamic mic that you might use for a guitar, is to pick up some room sound. Sometimes your close miking of an amp might sound kind of dry. You might want to hear more of how that amp sounds in a room. And so you just back up maybe several feet or even across the room and record as you're playing and add a little bit of that in, just like reverb, and it has a wonderful sound. So now let's talk about the sound clips. Here's some sound clips of a few of the different mics. And I was surprised by a few of these. Some of the changes that what we're going to be listening to were pretty drastic, and some where I thought you'd hear a big change, not so much. Didn't really sound different at all. But take a listen to these sound clips and you decide if you hear a big difference or not. What I did was I looped a little bit of guitar and I played it through my pedal board and into my Marshall Vintage Modern 2266C combo, which is awesome. It's a great amp. They don't make them anymore, and it's a great amp. It's got KT66 tubes. It's a vibey old Marshall tone, but it can have a ton of gain if you want it. But think Robin Trower. Think about his tone. That's what you get from those amps. So I've got one here in the studio, and the first set of clips that I have, and what I did was I took the SM57, the standard microphone, but what I did was I put it in different positions around the speaker so you can hear what it sounds like with the same guitar, same amp, same microphone, but just the microphone in different places. I wanted you to hear what a big difference the placement of the mic has on your tone. I have one that's at the very edge of the speaker, about a ½ inch off of it. Then the next one I have is about halfway between the center of the cone and the edge of the speaker, also a ½ inch away. And then I have one directly center over the center of the cone of the speaker, still about a ½ inch out from there. And then the last one I have is about 4 inches back. I pulled that last one back away, and that was about halfway between the speaker and the edge of the speaker and the center. So I wanted you to hear the difference between each one of those. So I'm going to go ahead and load those up now, and I'll tell you about each one of them as I play them. So here's my first clip. This is the SM57 right at the very edge of the speaker. And take a listen to this, and we'll talk about it right afterwards. So to me, that sounded like it was a little dull sounding. It didn't have a sparkling high end to it. It sounded a little distant to me. So what we're going to do is I'm going to work from the outside in. This was the outside of the speaker. Now the next clip is going to be the same microphone, the same distance away, but I'm going to move it closer into the center of the speaker. This is halfway between the edge and the cone. So that one's a bit brighter and it kind of cuts a little bit more, but it still has some lows to it. It's kind of a nice balance there, but still having a cutting sound. So we're kind of getting to it with that one. I like that one. So here's my next one. This one is all the way to the center of the cone. And you tell me what you think the difference is here. Let's take a listen. That was definitely the brightest one of them all. It had kind of a funkier kind of sound to it. It kind of slappy when I was scratching the strings on in between some of those chords. Well, if I was going to do like a funkier kind of thing, I'd go right for the center of the speaker cone there. So as we move from the outside, it's kind of a duller kind of sound. Then more of a balanced sound in between. And now we're at the very center. It's a brighter kind of funkier kind of sound. Okay, I've got one left. And this one is the one that's got some distance to it. Those were all a ½ inch right off the speaker. Now this one I've pulled back about 4 inches, but it's still about halfway in between the edge of the speaker and the center of the cone. Let's take a listen to that. So that was bright, but it was thinner sounding to me. It sounded very classic rock. It sounded very Lynyrd Skynyrd and Allman Brothers. That kind of a sound. That distance of the mic, it gives it a cutting kind of sound. Gets rid of a lot of the low end, but it was a little thin. It's a little thinner sounding to me. Very interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so that's my first round of clips. What did you think? Could you really hear the difference? I could hear the difference on especially that one of the edge of the speaker and the difference between that and the one directly in the center. But this new set of clips, I've got a few more. All of these were at the same place, halfway in between. That's kind of the one I like, halfway in between the edges of the cone and the center of the cone. And it's the same distance, but what I did is I switched out microphones. I didn't use the SM57 for each of them. So that way you could hear the difference between some different microphones. Some of the ones I have here, I don't have tons here, but I have a few of them here. So we had, let's see here, we have a SM57, which you just heard. We have an SM58 this time, so we can hear what the difference is between those two. And then I would use a condenser. This is an Audio-Technica AT2020 condenser. And then finally, I use this mic that I'm speaking in right now, the SM7B. I was really curious to see what that sounded like on the guitar cab. So let's go ahead and take a listen to those. Okay, here's just a short clip of the SM57 halfway between the edge and the cone. It cuts nice. It's got some good low end, good high end, and that nice mid bump there. Let's listen to the SM58 next. The SM58, the handheld vocal mic, sounds pretty good. Not as much high end as the SM57. Doesn't cut through as much, but it's still full. And it's got pretty much the same sound. You could probably EQ that to sound almost just like the 57 if you wanted to. Okay, let's move on to our condenser mic, the AT2020. This is the one that really surprised me. Usually a condenser microphone, it sounds very detailed. And this didn't sound much different to me than the SM58. It didn't have that, it didn't really cut through a whole lot like the 57 did. I was pretty shocked by this. I had a preconceived idea of what this was going to sound like, and I was completely wrong. It sounded more like the SM58 to me, even though that was a dynamic and this was a condenser. Maybe that's because the guitar speaker doesn't have those high frequencies and the low frequencies. And so it just didn't have anything to use to give that detail. But this one was the surprise for me. So here's my last one. This is the microphone I'm speaking through now. This is the SM7B. So sometimes when you have listening shootouts like this, you can kind of everything starts to sound the same. And that's kind of what's happening to me right now. So what I just did was I took a short snippet of each of those four and I run them back to back so we can hear what they sound like. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, so maybe that will give us a little bit better idea of the difference. To me, the one that stood out the most was the last one, the SM7B. What a great mic. Mic your guitar cabinets with it. Who knew? Who knew? So let's sum it all up. We talked about different uses for microphones with guitars. We introduced the different types of microphones, dynamic, condenser, and ribbon. We talked about the different polar patterns, which condenser is the one that we're really focused on the most. And we talked about which mic to use for different guitar situations. And then I went through some sound clips demonstrating the different tones you can get just from changing or moving your microphone around. What did you think? Did you hear a big difference? What kind of mics do you use on your guitar amps and acoustic guitars? We would all like to know. So leave me a comment in the show notes. It's over at playguitarpodcast.com/032. This is listener feedback. This is where, if you have a comment or a question I can help you with, I'll try my best to help you. To get in touch, you can always email me at feedback@playguitarpodcast.com. You can tweet at me at playguitarpdcst. You can use the comments on the show notes page or on the contact form on the site. Well, we had some great iTunes reviews or Apple Podcast reviews, depending on where you looked at it. I know Apple Podcast is quickly taking over there. And we had Dan Moyle from Interviewers Valet and Storytellers Know, where he left me a wonderful review. Thank you, Dan. I didn't know. I just checked that out today. It made my whole day. Thank you, Dan, so much. And also, Uncool Cracker left me a really nice one, too. So I really appreciate those reviews over at iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whichever one you listen to. Thanks, guys. I sure appreciate it. In email this week, I got another email from Scotty-O, and he thanked me he said I answered that cage system question that he had perfectly, and I helped him out, helped him kind of figure out where he was going from there. And so thank you, Scotty. I appreciate all the nice things that you said. I also got an email from Carlos V. He said I was still rocking after 31 episodes. I got to tell you, I'm just getting started. I got a whole list of stuff I want to get to. But what I've been doing is I've been listening to you guys. I've been getting in touch with a few of you, Skyping with a few of you, asking a lot of questions. And it's really been helping me with the show come up with ideas that could really, really help you. He said he's got an instructor now, and he's going to go see Rodrigo y Gabriela. He said he's going to go see them in August. It's August now, maybe happening right now. You're in luck. That is an awesome show. You'll really love it. And he says he's getting into jazz, and he asked me a few questions about that. So thank you, Carlos, for the email, and thank you for all the kind words. I appreciate it. I also got an email from Larry D. Larry shared a picture of his practice space. He's got guitar hangers. He's got the cool chair with the guitar stand built in and his Firehawk effects floorboard right there. And it's all set up for him to go anytime that he's ready to practice. Awesome, Larry. Love it. Love it. Love it. Good stuff. Thanks for sharing that with me. I appreciate it. And last email we got, this was from Kevin L. And he says he's new to guitar this year and he's really interested in the theory stuff. He says I'm helping him out with that. And he says that he would like to make his licks sound a little less like scales. And Kevin, I'll be back in touch with you soon to help you out with that right there. On Twitter, and thanks, Kevin. On Twitter, Jacob J, he had a request for a show about how to compose great guitar solos. And in particular, passing phrases, linking ideas. So you have some good ideas, but linking them together, making it sound musical. And thank you for a great idea. I'm going to put that in on my list of ideas to get to for the show. I appreciate it, Jacob. Thank you. And I also heard from Carlos again on Twitter. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, now let's get to the Facebook group. If you're interested in hanging out with us over in the Facebook group, go over to www.playguitargroup.com. It'll take you straight over there. I want to welcome some new members from this week. I'd like to welcome Joey W., Garula S., Norbert G., Chuck M., and Josh H. Thank you guys so much for joining. We're having a great time over there. This week I did my first live stream. I answered some questions. I had some topics I wanted to get to. I did it on Monday. It only took me 2 test streams to get it right. But by the third one was a charm, and it was a lot of fun. And I can't wait till next Monday to try it again. And so if you have any questions for me, head on over to the Facebook group. And on Monday, I think probably that morning, I'll let you know what time I'm going to stream. And you can ask me some questions there, and I'd be happy to help you. We've also been sharing some tunes. People have been uploading some videos, some guitar pictures. Chris put up his random riff number 1, which was awesome. Thank you, Chris. And, we're just getting started. We've got a good group of people here. And so join us over there. We'd love to see you. Okay. I also want to remind you about my free video lesson. It's called Get Your Blues Soloing Under Control. It's the 6 steps I found that will give you the right foundations for playing killer blues solos in no time at all. I got to spend some time with a few of you, got the idea for this, and I know that it can really help take your soloing in a new direction. The easy way to find it is just go to freeblueslesson.com. When you sign up for this, you'll also get news about all of my podcasts, videos, and other cool stuff. It'll be sent directly to your email inbox. So don't forget, go ahead and check that out at freeblueslesson.com. So that's a wrap. Thank you for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or your favorite podcast player, or just tell somebody about it. That would be great. Also, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a review for the show. If you're interested in online lessons, go on over to playguitaracademy.com and join my early adopter list to get news on the opening of the site and an early adopter discount. Also, follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at www.playguitarpodcast.com. Thanks again, and I will see you in episode 33.